So this video is going to be a quick primer for everything you need to know about Theros Beyond Death. So we're just going to quickly cover the mechanics and the other important themes of the set, so you can think of this as a quick rundown for everything you should expect for Theros Beyond Death. So a returning theme from the original Theros is Enchantments Matter, which essentially means there'll be a lot of cards that care about enchantments in the set. A big way that Theros accomplishes this is by having enchantment creatures, which is something you really don't see on other planes. Nyxborn Colossus here is a really good example. Just a simple card, 6 mana, 6/7, no real abilities, but what's important is that it's an enchantment creature giant if you look at its type line. And the Enchantments Matter theme brings us to our first mechanic of the set, Constellation. Constellation is really simple. When an enchantment enters the battlefield, something happens. That includes regular enchantments, auras, and even the enchantment creatures we were just looking at. So Tessin Champion here is a really powerful example of the Constellation ability. Every time an enchantment enters the battlefield, you draw a card, and you put a +1/+1 counter on Tessin Champion. So every card with Constellation in your deck is going to make all your enchantments have a little bit extra value, and it means your enchantment creatures will be pulling double duty as well. Also fitting nicely within the Enchantments Matters theme is the return of Sagas. We last saw Sagas in Dominaria, and how these cards work is they basically tell a story. When you first play the card, you play Chapter 1, and then next turn, after your draw step, you move on to Chapter 2, and so on and so forth. So in the case of the Akroan War, you pay 4 mana, play it, and then immediately get its Chapter 1 ability. Gain control of target creature for as long as the Akroan War remains on the battlefield. Then on your next turn after your draw step, you go onto its Chapter 2 ability. Until your next turn, creatures your opponents control attack each combat if able. And then finally, on the turn after that, you move on to its third chapter. Each tapped creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. Because there are only 3 chapters, you then sacrifice the Akroan War afterwards. So far in Magic, we've only seen Sagas with 3 chapters, but we've gotten some hints from Wizards of the Coast that Theros Beyond Death will be the first set to feature a greater number of chapters on its Sagas. So if there were a saga with 4 or 5 or 6 chapters, you would continue the same way, continuing on to Chapter 4, then 5, then 6, and then sacrificing it after the last chapter. The other mechanic returning from the original Theros block, and probably the mechanic most associated with Theros, is Devotion. So to determine how much devotion you have for a given color, you just count up the number of pips you have of that color in the top right of your cards. So for example, if turn 1 you played a Plains, and turn 2 you played a Plains and then played Daxos here, your devotion to white would be 2. Because Daxos has 2 white mana symbols in his cost. You don't count lands towards your devotion. If, for example, you had 2 Daxoses on the battlefield, your devotion to white would be 4, because each of them would have 2 white mana symbols in its cost. An important thing to note about devotion is we just came out of a monocolored set with Throne of Eldraine. So there are a lot of cards with a lot of pips in their mana cost, such as Torbran. Torbran by himself would give you 3 devotion to red. Then there's hybrid cards like Rampart Smasher. There were a lot of hybrid cards in Throne of Eldraine, and they work really well with devotion. Rampart Smasher, for example, gives you 4 devotion towards red and 4 devotion towards green. And then the last mechanic in Theros Beyond Death is a brand new mechanic, Escape. Escape lets you cast a card out of your graveyard for its escape cost. So far, all escape costs have cost some amount of mana and exiling some number of cards out of your graveyard as you cast the card. I think in terms of raw potential, Escape is the most powerful mechanic we've seen out of Theros Beyond Death. The card you cast with Escape doesn't exile itself, and there's no limit to escaping only once with a card, so potentially you can just continue casting the same card over and over again if you have enough cards in your graveyard. Underworld Ragehound, for example, comes down as an early attacker, and then if it dies, you can continue to bring it back as a 4/2 over and over again. Exiling cards out of your graveyard isn't something you can do indefinitely, however. You're eventually just going to run out of cards. But I would keep an eye on this mechanic. For my money, it's going to be the most broken mechanic out of the set. And that covers Theros Beyond Death. I hope this primer helped you out. And if you like this video, I have a budget deck series and a drafting series, so if you'd like to, go ahead and check them out. Thanks for watching.